Well, I'm so grateful to be here with my dear friend, Dr. Enoch Nam, who is going to be one of our guests in this calling series for the Office of Student Success. And I'm grateful not only because of his professional success and story that he's going to share with us today, but on a more personal note, he is somebody that is very near and dear to my heart and my own life and my own journey. He was a college roommate of mine and the best man at my wedding, and somebody that we've journeyed together as very close friends over the last, I don't know, it's 25, 30 years now, something like that. And and then we still continue to have ongoing conversations that began in our college apartment and dorm rooms and all those things. And so I'm so delighted to have Dr. Nam here join us for this conversation. Dr. Nam, will you please begin by sharing us a little bit about what do you do for your work, right? What do you do and how did you get into that industry?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm an ophthalmologist, and I'm a medical doctor that specializes in treating eye conditions and doing surgeries for eye conditions. And so the journey involves college, 4 years of medical school, uh, 4 years of residency training. Then I did another year of fellowship to specialize in the cornea, which is the front part of the eye. And so a typical week looks like seeing patients in the office 3 to 4 days a week, and then 1 to 1.5 days of doing surgery. So later today, I'll actually be doing surgery. All day yesterday, I was in surgery. And a big part of the surgeries I do is cataract surgery, helping people see again after they've lost their vision, and also cornea transplants, which is again replacing the front of the eye. And it's awesome. I love what I do because, Thursdays I typically do the surgery. Friday the bandages come off and smiles. Patients are just so happy. They're talking about, oh my gosh, the colors are so vivid. I didn't realize my vision had gotten so bad. I can see things so much better now. It's very rewarding because it's
Mm,
just a tangible gift that I can give to patients, the gift of sight.
yeah.
And so I got into
That's
this.
quite the turnaround. I mean, we're talking about surgery one day, the next day you're seeing the results and you're getting the feedback, and I can see how gratifying that can be. In the case of other medical professionals, I'm assuming that there are other more delayed forms of gratification. Would that generally be the case in people in that industry?
Yes, I mean, I think that everyone's wired a little differently. For
Yeah.
example, my wife, who's a pediatrician, she's not a surgeon, and she's journeying with these families through the course of 18 years, and it's just walking with them through a lot of visits where they're just healthy and they're checking in.
Yeah.
And you know she and I are just wired so differently. She doesn't need that.
Yeah.
For her, just having that long-term relationship with these families and just being there for them when they get a cold or any of these things, it's really rewarding for her. For me, I always tell my staff, give me something I can fix.
Yeah.
I want to fix something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the way I'm wired. And maybe I'm just more selfish. I don't know, but it's what drives me to be able to give that to people.
You don't hear that part of medical professionals or healthcare professionals very much, that there are different types of jobs that may reflect one's personality
Mm.
better or worse, right? I mean, I think what you just shared right there, even the difference between you and your wife, that is a profound point as students or medical professionals, health professionals even decide whether they want to go into surgery or not. Sometimes, at least the way that I've heard it, people choose to go into surgery or not based upon how much money they want to make. But you're saying that in some ways, and I'm sure people still do that,
Mhm.
more or less, but
Mhm.
that there's a certain kind of even personality type
Oh,
that may gravitate more towards one type of healthcare profession that that is a little more dramatic, let's say, and
yes,
gratifying in a dramatic way. Another through relationship, through
yes,
building community, through long-term growth, and sometimes even the most non-dramatic ways, right?
yes.
And would you say that is the case generally for your industry, that personality types and healthcare professions they do kind of go hand in hand?
Yes, I mean, I think, I mean, I can only speak to medicine. You know, I don't know too much about nursing and some of these other health professions, but within medicine, you know, there's such a spectrum of of how we practice medicine,
Yeah.
and a big part of it is your personality. And that's why there's these hilarious just little shorts. There's a well-known ophthalmologist right now. His name's Dr. Glaucom Floken, and he just does these little parodies of different doctors, types of doctors, anesthesiologists versus
Yeah.
the orthopedic doctor versus the ophthalmologist. And of course, they're stereotypes, but we all laugh at them because they're so spot on in terms of that personality
Something
type that
recognizable.
that
Yeah.
typically gravitates towards these professions. So it could be, you know, something that you just feel like, well, I guess medicine makes the most sense because I like the sciences, and I'm always good, and this is something I'm good at. You know, I was the same way. I you know, tell me to write a paper and I can't do it. You know, tell me to write an email, it's like so hard. You know, writing just doesn't come naturally to me. As much as I love the humanities, that's just always scared me. But you know, for people going to medicine, let's say it's hard for you to interact with people. You're an introvert. Well, guess what? A radiologist who sits in a dark room and just reads films, interacts
Yes.
with just a couple people,
Yeah.
coworkers.
Yeah.
A pathologist is just reading slides all day, you know, and it's like you're in your own world. You're at peace because it fits your personality so well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes I can imagine, some people kind of almost disqualify themselves maybe
mhm,
too early because they think, oh, I don't fit what they think is the mold of a medical doctor in some way. But within the practice of medicine, you're saying that it actually there's a personality trait. There's a job for every personality in some ways.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. And I think it kind of segues into when you're trying to figure this stuff out. I do think it's so helpful to meet with real people in these professions and try to find someone that when you meet that person, you're like, oh, that's me. I
Mm.
can see a glimpse of my personality in theirs,
Yeah.
and my strengths in theirs.
Yeah.
And that can help tremendously. So a big part of what I like to try to do is, you know, we have pre-health people working for us. Like 80% of my staff are pre-med, pre-nursing, pre-PA, pre-nurse practitioner. And of course, with the medicine part, I try to be a mentor to them as because I know that journey.
Yeah.
But just this past week, I networked with a nurse practitioner in the operating room, and I really liked her personality, her energy, her positivity, her compassion. She just seems to exemplify what a great nurse practitioner should do. And she's one of the first surgical nurse practitioners they hired at this hospital. So she's also kind of pioneering
Yeah.
something. And so right away, I thought, okay, who's a nurse practitioner in my office? Let me
Yeah.
connect them so that she can meet with him and catch a vision
Yeah.
for to sustain her
Yeah.
through the rigors of the book work, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you're learning like some chemical reaction and you got to memorize all these pathways, like there's a rare person. I don't care if you know if science is your thing that just finds true joy in that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you need something to sustain you
Yeah.
to get you through that time. And then when you go through your clinicals and your residency, you're not sleeping, you're giving up your youth, you're sacrificing it.
Yeah.
Everyone else is traveling, everyone else is vacationing, everyone's going out to movies. You're in the hospital. You're dedicating yourself to this. And I don't care how passionate you are about it. If you don't have a vision that's fleshed out
Yeah.
and not some idea,
Right.
um, not some idealized thing about it, but like a like life experience, you're just not going to get through it. You're going to get burned out. And
That's
so,
so good. If I could highlight just a couple of things from what you just said right now, I think one that really stands out is that nobody goes into medicine for the joy of the schoolwork by itself, right?
yes,
And you could think of how many students struggle with that part, and they think maybe I'm not cut out to become a doctor or a nurse or whatever it is in healthcare because I don't love studying this thing. But you're saying that there is a certain degree where that's just a means to an end, right? You got to get to that. Nobody is going to fully enjoy or love doing that part of it, but that's part of just even the journey of getting to the point where you can pursue the things that you might enjoy, right? And so I think that that's a really important point. The second point that I really want to also emphasize is that I love that you're trying to connect, right? People to professionals, exemplary figures, and these things. But even your earlier point about the diversity of different personalities in the medical profession, what it seems to me is that you also don't want students to make decisions based upon one interaction, right?
mhm.
Based upon one personality trait, right? And I remember for me, when I was a college student, I mean, I too was on the kind of pre-med track, and I had a very crucial encounter with a doctor who was miserable. And he was like,
Yes,
"Don't do it. Why would you want to do this, right? Go into something else." And that left such an impression on me. Now there's many other factors, even my
yes,
inability to
yes,
deal with
yes.
chemistry and things
Yeah,
like that. But
right.
but I remember that encounter, maybe perhaps even over determining my decision to move away from
That's good.
medicine. And so I like that. Yes, we got to meet people, we got to hear stories, but maybe the one encounter isn't the only encounter. Just because you can't see yourself in one person and one
Mm.
story doesn't mean that you shouldn't continue to pursue other potential stories out there. That's good.
So good. So
Yeah.
good. I 100% agree. I had the same experience.
Yeah.
I went to get a physical before my medical school. I said, "Hey, I got into medical school. I need this physical. Any advice to me?" And no expression. Yeah, don't go. It's not worth it.
Yeah, yeah,
My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe how disillusioned and unhappy could you be that you're telling this to someone who already got in. I'm already committed. I have no choice. Can you at least lie to me so that I can just go and not be stressed
Yes.
out about it?
Yeah, yeah,
But it was when I met an ophthalmologist, like a couple, prior to that. And she was passionate about what she was doing. She loved it. And
yeah,
her eyes lit up, and you could see the true satisfaction that she had doing what she did. That left a marked impression on me.
yeah,
So I love what you said about that. I think going back to what you said about, you know, being good at something or enjoying something, I think that's what made this so hard for me was
yeah.
that, the science classes didn't excite me. I loved going to classes with you.
Yeah,
I liked going to the Nietzsche class where we thought about these deep questions. I loved the philosophy classes.
yeah,
I love the English classes. Like that's what excited me. But that's where the difficulty was for me is that okay, that brings me so much joy, but one, I can't write the papers, so maybe I could eventually figure that out, but I also couldn't figure out where I fit in with my strengths. Like
yeah,
there's something that you really enjoy and you like, and then there's also kind of having a realistic inventory about like what am I good at, and
yeah,
how am I built.
yeah,
And eventually I found that in medicine, but I still think that all that exposure to the humanities, right, and all that kind of complemented me in medicine so
yeah.
that I can be a more holistic in terms of how I care for people, right, and how I
Mhm.
think about things. And so I don't think you necessarily have to discount it, but you can kind of see how it all fits in
Yeah,
to that calling that God has for you, right?
yeah,
And it doesn't have to be so exclusive. Oh, that's just for the English people and English professors.
yeah,
And I think that's what I encourage college students too, is like pigeonhole yourself so much, right? People, like you said, there's people who come in so clear. They know exactly what classes they're going to take, what's the steps they need to take to get to this spot the most efficiently,
Yeah.
right? They don't want to waste any time in classes that are possibly going to tank their GPA,
Yeah.
classes that have no, help on paper to getting them where they need to get to in medicine, right? And so I think especially for the pre-health people, they're the most paranoid about, man, if I can't write a paper and I take this English class, that's going to be a problem, right? But I'm not saying to sabotage yourself, but also this is your one chance
Yeah.
to explore other things that you may not otherwise to do. And so
No,
I feel,
that's the Steve Jobs story, right? That somehow the whole company, Apple, came out of a class he took about fonts, about
mm,
beautiful fonts, right?
mm,
And there's a story where he took this random class about fonts and how, how to design fonts and these types of things. And I just always thought how amazing that attention to beauty, right?
mm,
Beautiful lettering, right? Figured into the design of their computers and products and their whole design philosophy came out of even this random class that Steve Jobs took.
yeah,
And there's a book called Range that I really love. It's by David Epstein, and the
okay.
subtitle of the book is called "Why Generalists Will Triumph in a Specialized World."
Oh,
And the
nice.
book begins with a comparison of Tiger Woods and Roger Federer, right?
Okay.
And David Epstein, the author, says that depending on what kind of game you're playing, right, you either need to be like a Tiger Woods who specializes very early and just focuses on that one game. Golf is a type of game that requires you to specialize early.
Okay.
But he says that most jobs, most careers, most life paths actually require more range. And he uses Roger Federer as an example. He says that tennis is a very different kind of game, much more dynamic because it's not just you and the ball in the golf course, it's you against another player. And
Okay.
so Federer did not come to find tennis until late into high school, actually,
Mm,
after having played many other sports, right? And one of the arguments that he makes is that Federer became Federer in part because he had more range. He had more diverse experiences,
mm.
right? And
So
so
good.
so this is kind of the counterbalance to the grit message. Angela Duckworth, just specialize, have grit, and just hold on and keep going through. And this
Yes.
this is to balance that argument out to say that sometimes we need more range. And what I'm hearing from you, even in your own college experience, right,
Yes.
is that even some of those non-science, non-pre-medicine experiences actually provided you with the kind of range that maybe you didn't know at the time,
Yes.
right? How is all going to connect? But
Yes.
now you're at a place in your career, right? In your success where you look back and you see how all that has contributed to that. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I wish I could just well, I guess you're recording this so that I could just listen to that. That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. That's exactly right. I
Yeah.
think that from a kind of just a worldly perspective, there would be times when, I'm 3 years older than everybody in
Yeah.
the med school.
That's
And
right.
kind of thinking, I wish I just went straight,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
didn't waste time. That's the worldly way to think about it. And
Yeah.
the other way to think about it as a person of faith is to say, well, God, how did God use that time
Yeah.
um, to shape me and make me better,
Yeah.
right? I think that's the beauty of being a Christian is that, yeah, you can make mistakes or yeah, you can even make a mistake and do something that wasn't necessarily the best thing, but you can look back on it. And if you let God redeem it, you can
Yeah.
look at it as with regret, or like, this is how I grew from it. This is how
Yeah.
I learned from it.
Yeah.
And this is how God used it. And I 100% agree that when I look back at my forays into ministry, being a youth pastor, um, it 100% helps me be a better mentor to these students,
Yeah.
these college students that are coming, the young people that I'm trying to, model for them what it means to be a good, caring, compassionate health professional. And if one of them is Christian, to try to show them how I live that out in my profession. And so absolutely, I love what you said. I'm gonna read that book, Range. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great book. Highly recommend it. Oh man, there's a number of threads I want to just kind of continue on here just a little bit and even develop further. I want to talk about your college days a little bit more and how you feel like looking back, college formed you, right, in crucial ways for your current professional success. And I also want to revisit even your experience in ministry because that was almost kind of an alternative career path that you
Yes.
considered and what you learned from that experience as well. But tell me a little bit more about college. When you look back, right, and you trace, your success now, how does it go back to some of those things in college? What experiences, what relationships, what are the things that you think really formed and shaped you for your set you up for your current success?
Well, I mean, the best advice I could give your students is if there's somebody around you who looks like they're going to become the future dean of student success, like become close friends with them. No, but in all seriousness, that I do think the people you surround yourself with is important, and I do think that there's those friends that are just going to bring you down. They're not going to help you
Mm.
become the best version of yourself, challenge you, and you know, help you fulfill that calling in your life. They're just going to be distractions. And I'm not saying like you got to push those people aside. Like if you can be that leader and you can help those people get on track, that's beautiful. But if you're not that person, you got to find people around you to help you think like that.
Yeah.
And that's why I've always appreciated our friendship. We met, early on, freshman year, and
Welcome
like I
week
said, huh?
welcome week before the semester began.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And at the time, it's not like I had these big questions or big ambitions. To be perfectly honest with you, I was pre-med, but it's not like something I was super passionate about. I wasn't that student who was like, "Oh, I got to do this, and that to get there." I was kind of there to have a good time. I was finally free of my super authoritarian regime of living at home, and I had freedom. And I had just kind of discovered being popular and having friends. So I was like kind of wanting to live that out a little bit. And if I had continued on that trend, I know I would have wasted my potential. I just know it. Because I just didn't have the internal drive and that motivation. And I think maybe that can speak to some of those people who are just there, that they just kind of like the motions carried them to this point. It's almost been passive, right, to a certain extent. And now they're there, they're free, they're free of their parents, they can do whatever they want, and they're just sitting at home playing video games all day with their
Yeah.
roommates. We knew friends like that, right? Who flunked
Yeah.
out of classes and
Right.
just wasted their tuition money because they're just there to have a good time. And I think it was fantastic that, I think against God's grace that I met you and you invited me to church. We had that encounter where it kind of just realigned all our priorities. Um, and then, and then I had a purpose. I had a mission.
Yeah.
I had a focus.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I see it went down. And then we surrounded ourselves with other people who shared our passion
Mm.
and our focus, and
Mm.
people who weren't going to bring us down, but people who we could count on to keep us accountable, to continue to push us and motivate us to this ultimate goal. Even though it was very nebulous and very general, we didn't know really what it looked like exactly in terms of a profession.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it went down for our college experience.
This is as true as it was for us when we went to school as it is still now, right?
Yeah,
People come into college saying, "I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that,
yeah,
I'm an engineering major,"
yeah.
and you just get the sense like, why? Like, why are you doing this, right? Well, how did you make that decision? And
Right.
oh, it's a good paying job, it's
Yeah.
whatever, it's this and that. I know somebody, or but there is this, we all struggled with that journey of trying to figure out, well, is this what I'm called to do? Is this what I
Yeah.
want to do? Is it what I need to do? Is it what I
Yes.
should be doing?
Right.
Right? What is behind some of those decisions? And especially because of the cost of higher education now, those questions are more important than ever, right? And
Mhm.
students are, I think, I think students have always asked that question,
Mm.
but there is a certain kind of, there's more at stake
Yeah.
right now in terms
Yeah.
of what that means.
Yeah. I was thinking about that over the past week about trying to go back to that time
Yeah.
of college. And first of all, I just think it's so interesting, like where we were at that time in terms of what we wanted to do, right? And I think a big turning point for both of us was when we essentially became devout Christians. I mean, we both grew up Christian, um, but for me personally, it was more my parents' faith and something I did ever since I was little.
Yeah.
And then, coming to college and going to church with you and having that kind of encounter, life-changing encounter. And, you had that first, and then subsequently me, and then us being on fire for God and wanting to serve him and do something amazing for him. And then I think for us, that kind of most clearly translated into doing ministry,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, well, if we're so on fire for God, we love reading the word and serving him and being at church. Well, the most natural thing, of course, is we should go into ministry, right? So that was
Yeah.
our thing,
Yeah.
our goal. And thinking back to that, to you doing a dean, right? You're a dean now, and I'm a eye doctor. It's kind of crazy how it evolved that way, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, I wonder if it had to be that way, right? To arrive at a sense of calling, not just a career, right? That there's something about passing through the crucible of wanting to devote everything to God,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And yeah, you're right. In our younger days, we translated that into ministry, into being pastors or speakers
Yes.
or things like that.
Yes.
But there is that sense that and then we had to work through, well, is this it? Are we really cut out for this? Is this the right place for us? But we were formed by that devotion in a certain way that I think continues, I'm assuming, to in our practices now, in our careers now. And so that is the connection that I'm hoping to make. There's so many students who are, right, even those students who are like, they're dead set, they know what they want to do. They want to become
Yes.
a nurse.
Right.
And I see, some of our highest achieving students, because we run one of the honor societies here in my office, and you see some of those students who are just singularly focused
Yes.
on that career track. They've got the CV, they got the resume, right? All the grades, the
Mm,
GPA, they're
mm.
headed to grad school, they're headed to medical school, right?
Yeah.
All kinds of things. But there is a little bit of lack of like, why are you doing this? Where's your
Yeah.
devotion? What are you passionate about? What is calling you, right, to that? And one of the things I'm really hoping is whether those students continue in that track or find something else, that every one of them at some point will pass through that crucible of learning to devote themselves to something more meaningful, right? Something higher. And so,
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was thinking that when you think of calling, a lot of it depends on who's doing that calling.
that's right.
Like, whose calling are you responding to?
That's right.
Right. And I think that's kind of what I had to unpack in college, is that for as long as I could remember, I wanted to be a doctor. And I go to college and I realize, one, I don't know any doctors. There's not a single doctor in my family.
Yes.
I didn't have a mentor who was a doctor.
Yes.
The only reason I wanted to be a doctor was because my parents, that's the calling. They felt like it was the right thing for me,
Yeah.
right? So it was partially the expectations of my parents.
You were responding to your parents' call.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then there's like society calling, right? And so like I watched ER That's back when George Clooney was on there. It was like the hottest show.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, I can see myself doing that.
Yeah.
But it's such a false version of it. It's not a real human being. It's an actor, right?
Yeah.
It's not real life.
Yeah.
And so there's that, and then there's, you know, everything that society values, like status. Like if you do these kind of jobs, it's going to go well with you. You're going to have a secure job. You're going to be, you know, financially stable, all those things. And so there's that. And then there's like selfish calling. Like this is, I was reading this whole thing about self-realization. College is about figuring out who you are and what fulfills you and all these things, which is all important, right? You want to find the things that you're passionate about, that excites you. But I do think to a certain extent, kind of like going back to our formation and that crucible, like having something that transcends me, something that transcends my parents or society's expectations, right? That's what we experienced
That's
when
right.
we authentically, truly let our
Yeah.
faith
Yeah.
shape our worldview
Yeah.
and what we wanted out of life,
Yeah.
right? And I was reminded of a Bible verse that I held dear to my heart during that time, right? And I remember just walking around and reading it a lot, and it's by, you would think by that means I would have it by memory, but I don't. I'll share it with you. It's Philippians 3:7.
Yeah.
But whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage that I may gain Christ. I just remember that time being like, you know what? I'm gonna give up like this whole thing of being this perfect son who just makes my parents so proud and achieving, you know, all their dreams of being here as immigrants and hoping for a better life for my child. I'm gonna give up like whatever the world thinks is valuable, like being popular, you know, having so much fun, like status, wealth. I'm gonna give up even what I feel like I want because I want a higher purpose, something that transcends me. Because when I find that, it's gonna give me that drive, that passion to fulfill whatever I'm called to do to the best of my ability, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we found during that experience, and I think that's what hopefully makes CBU stand out a little bit, is that there's that integration of where does the faith part of it, you know, it starts there when Jesus said, "Follow me, and I will make you, and then I will make you fishers of men," right? So it's kind of like they were doing their job, and there's nothing wrong about fishing.
Yeah.
Fishing, you know, some people are called to fish, but these
Yeah.
guys were called to do something more.
Yeah.
Like they were just doing their job and just kind of going through the click, punching in, taking out, looking forward to lunch, looking forward to the end of the day. You know, that's not what they were called to do. That wasn't their passion.
Yeah.
But God said, "Hey, follow me first.
Yeah.
Do that first. Make me first, and then I'm gonna make you, do what your calling is and your purpose is, right?" And
That's
so,
so good. Yeah, that's so good because even that verse that you read from Philippians, I mean, part of the irony is that here Paul says it's all rubbish, right? It's nothing. I consider all lost, compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ. And yet, it's precisely all those things that he considered rubbish that prepared him to write half the New Testament,
mm,
right? And so there is a sense in which, right, the status or the enjoyment or some of the other, right, making our parents proud,
yeah,
right? All of those other maybe lesser things that initially called you to medicine,
yes,
right,
yeah,
are no longer put on a shelf or a pedestal. They're no longer
yes,
idols in the sense that we're holding onto them so tightly. And
totally,
once we give that up for something transcendent, something higher,
yeah,
and yet all that comes to us now as now a tool,
yeah.
right? And now it becomes something that can be useful and it's
Yes.
not an end in itself. So many people, their identities are so wrapped up in
Yes.
these lesser goods when they're meant to be tools and just like, to further the glory of God and these types of things. And that's where we want to help students really try
Yeah.
to make that transition from thinking just about their career, about how to
Yeah.
be successful. I feel
Right.
like that's where so many students are. That's where we are in our culture. We
Yes.
want to know what's the return on investment of this
Yeah.
degree, of this pathway, right? All those TikTok videos that are obsessed with, right? What do you do? How much money do you make, right?
Mm.
How long have you been in that industry? And I'm kind of trying to piggyback on some of those TikTok videos and say it's much more nuanced, much more complicated.
Mm.
If you want a really fulfilling life, a life
Yeah.
you feel like, here at CB, we talk about living your purpose, right?
Yes.
You got to find a higher sense of calling if you're going to live that purpose. And so,
I love that. I love what you said about, all those things being factors.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I think, like you said, it's important to think about all those aspects to it. And but I love what you said about not making it your idol,
yeah,
your end all be all. Because so much of the time those things creep in and then they become, that number one purpose, that thing that's driving you, your end goal.
yeah,
And that's when you see it lead to emptiness and lack of fulfillment, because you see, and we talk about it so much, like it's almost trite, right? Like, oh yeah, if you have all those things, you see all the people with all these status, power, money, all, great jobs, all that success,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But they're so empty inside. It's because they made that their end all be all. So
yeah,
why do we have to keep saying this
yeah,
over and over again? Why do we have to keep seeing movies and characters and books, and yet we follow that same footstep?
yeah.
Why is that? And I think that's the human nature. It's like we're like Israelites. We get led out by a God,
That's good. Yeah, yeah,
and then literally a month later, we're creating another God. Like,
yeah,
and it's a calf. It's like
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
how does this compare to a God that just took you through the Red Sea?
yeah,
We look at it and we think, oh my gosh, these Israelites must have been below level intelligence. Like, who would do that?
yeah.
And yet we do it every day,
That's right.
because the enemy just has a subtle way of kind of shifting things around little by little. And next thing you know, you didn't even know it. And you're saying all the right things. Oh yeah, it's all about God.
Yeah,
Oh, it's all about, fulfilling my calling, my purpose. But you've now have a different God that you're worshiping,
that's
right?
right.
And so
That's right.
it's
Yeah,
it's like a
and
daily check and
it
constant
is.
sanctification, and daily being renewed, and needing the grace of God, because I'm the same way, right? It's just it's not something that just happens in college and then you figure it out and you're good. No, it keeps going.
That's right.